Welcome back to our journey through the Recalibrate Method. Last week, we explored the emotional landscape of disconnection, how guilt, anger, and shame emerge when we begin separating from our limiting beliefs and conditioning, and why these feelings are essential parts of authentic transformation. Today, we're going to focus on the holistic disconnect phase, that critical moment where we create space between ourselves and the limiting beliefs and conditioning we've identified. If you completed our deconstruct exercise from a few weeks back, you'll want to use that same limiting belief or conditioning for today's work. If you're just joining us, you can still participate, but I recommend revisiting the deconstruct video when you can. So grab your journal and pen, find a quiet space, and let's work through this disconnect step together. So how do we actually disconnect from these deeply ingrained beliefs and conditioning? Let me walk you through the process step by step. Feel free to pause the video when needed to complete each part of the exercise. Step 1 is to revisit your limiting belief or conditioning. First, write down the limiting belief or conditioning you're working with. This could be something like I'm not creative enough, I don't deserve success, or I have to be perfect to be worthy. Write it exactly as it appears in your mind. Now let's prepare to disconnect from this belief by exploring your readiness. This isn't about replacing the belief yet. That comes later. Right now, we're focused solely on creating space between you and the belief or conditioning. So step 2 is to assess your readiness. Disconnection requires honest self-reflection about whether you're truly ready to separate from this belief. Let's explore this through several questions. First, imagine a good friend came to you struggling with this exact same belief or conditioning. What would you tell them? Write down what advice or perspective you would offer. Now envision your life without this belief. What would your life look like if you disconnected from it? How would you feel? What would you notice that's different? What do you think will be the most difficult thing about disconnecting from this belief or conditioning? What scares you or worries you the most about disconnecting from this belief or conditioning? And be completely honest with yourself here. Are you willing to admit that this belief has held you back in some way? Do you feel motivated to separate from this belief, knowing that later you'll have the opportunity to replace it with something more empowering? Finally, considering everything you've reflected on, are you ready and willing to disconnect from this belief? On a scale of 1 to 10, how ready do you feel? When assessing your readiness on a scale of 1 to 10, here are some factors to help you determine how to rate yourself. Rate yourself a 1, 2, or a 3 if any of these factors are true. Rate yourself a 4, 5, or 6 if any of these factors ring true. Rate yourself a 7 or 8 if any of these factors are true. And finally, rate yourself a 9 or a 10 if any of these factors are true. The key factors that influence your rating include how clearly you see the belief's negative impact, your emotional attachment to the belief, your ability to imagine alternatives, your willingness to experience discomfort during change, and the strength of your motivation to create change. If you're having trouble assigning a number, ask yourself, if I had the opportunity to instantly and permanently disconnect from this belief right now, would I take it? If your answer includes any form of yes, but qualifiers, you're likely below a 7. Remember that readiness can fluctuate. You might feel more ready on some days than others, and that's completely normal in the change process. If you rated your readiness at 7 or above, you're likely in a good position to proceed with disconnecting from this belief. If you're below a 7, that's perfectly okay. disconnecting is a process that happens when you're ready. You might need time to sit with the understanding you gained in the deconstruct phase before moving forward. Which leads us into step 3, create your recognition phrase. A critical part of disconnecting is recognizing when the belief is operating in your life. Let's create a simple phrase you'll use to acknowledge this belief when it appears. So on your paper, complete this sentence. When this belief appears, I will say to myself, fill in the blank. It might be something like, I see you, old belief, or I notice this thought pattern arising. Whatever you want. The key is to use language that creates separation while remaining compassionate. You are not your beliefs. You are the awareness that can observe them. Step 4 is to design a pattern interruption. When you notice your limiting belief triggering a habitual response, you need a way to interrupt that pattern. So on your paper, write down, how does this belief typically make me behave? And what small alternative action can I take instead? For example, if your belief is, I don't deserve success, and it typically makes you self-sabotage when opportunities arise, your interruption might be to take 3 deep breaths and ask yourself, what would I do if I were worthy of this opportunity? Make your interruption specific and doable in the moment. We're not looking for perfection, just a way to create a pause between stimulus and response. Step 5 is to create your release ritual. Now let's design a symbolic way to release this belief. On your paper, brainstorm a simple ritual that feels meaningful to you. This could be things like writing the belief on paper and safely burning it, speaking it aloud and then blowing it away, visualizing it as an object and mentally placing it outside of yourself, or creating a physical gesture that represents letting go. Choose something that engages multiple senses and creates a physical representation of letting go. The mind responds powerfully to these symbolic actions. Now, actually schedule a specific time in the next 24 hours when you'll perform this ritual. The physical act of releasing reinforces the psychological process of disconnecting. Step 6 is to prepare for the void. When you disconnect from a limiting belief, there's a void, an empty space where the belief used to be. This can feel uncomfortable, but it's a necessary part of the process. So on your paper, write down how you'll remind yourself that this void is intentional and valuable. It might be a phrase like, this space is where possibility lives, or I'm creating room for something new. Remember, we're not rushing to fill this space yet. That comes after the change or choice point, which we'll explore in our next session. For now, we're practicing being comfortable with the space itself. Step 7 is to anticipate challenges. Disconnecting is rarely a one-time event. Your belief will likely try to reassert itself, especially in stressful situations. So write down 3 situations where this belief might try to return and how you'll respond when it does. For example, when I'm about to try something new, this belief will try to return. I'll respond by acknowledging it with my recognition phrase, performing my pattern interruption, and proceeding anyway. Take a few minutes now to write these down. Step 8 is to create your daily practice. Let's bring all of these elements together into a daily practice of disconnecting. On your paper, outline what your daily practice of disconnect will look like. It could be something like in the morning you set an intention to notice when the belief appears. Throughout the day, you use your recognition phrase when you notice the belief. When triggered, you implement your pattern interruption. And in the evening, you reflect on moments when you successfully created separation from the belief. Take a few minutes now and write down your own daily practice plan that feels doable for your life and your schedule. And finally, step 9, to create accountability. Decide how you'll keep yourself accountable to this practice. Will you share your disconnect process with a friend? Check in with yourself weekly in your journal? Maybe join our online community for support? You can always reach out to me. take a few moments to write down your accountability plan and when you'll start. Now take a moment to review everything you've written. This is your personalized disconnect process, a pathway for creating space between the limiting belief and the conditioning that has been constraining your life and yourself. Remember, we're not yet focused on replacing this belief. That comes next week when we talk about the change or choice point. Right now, we're practicing the art of separation, of seeing the belief as something outside yourself rather than an inherent truth. The emotions we discussed previously of guilt, anger, and shame may visit you during this journey. When they do, acknowledge them and as a part of the process, not as obstacles to it. To bring our exercise to a close, I invite you to physically embody your commitment to this disconnect process. Stand up if you're able, take a deep breath, and make a simple gesture that represents letting go. Perhaps it's opening your hands or brushing something off your shoulders. Feel the intention in your body and not just in your mind. Next week, we'll explore what happens after we disconnect from our limiting beliefs and conditioning, how we enter the change or choice point where new possibilities emerge. But for now, you have everything you need to begin this powerful process of creating space between yourself and your limiting beliefs and conditioning. In the comments below, I'd love to hear which readiness question resonated most deeply with you, or any insights that emerged as you worked through this exercise. Don't forget to join our community of conscious, authentic changemakers for support on this journey. And remember, disconnection isn't about rejecting parts of yourself. It's about creating freedom to choose who you want to become. Thank you so much for watching.